Let me start by telling you something that might feel uncomfortable. Most of what you've been told about confidence is wrong, not slightly off, not a little misleading, fundamentally, structurally, dangerously wrong. And if you're in sales, or if you're anyone who needs to put yourself out there in the world, which in this economy is basically every single one of us, this misunderstanding about confidence might be the single biggest thing holding you back. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what confidence actually is, where it actually comes from, and why the version of confidence you've been chasing your entire career might be the very thing that's been destroying your results. Here's the standard story you've been told. Confidence means believing in yourself. Confidence means walking into a room and knowing you're going to close the deal. Confidence means feeling certain. Confidence means radiating some kind of inner power that makes other people trust you, follow you, buy from you. And so what do people do? They stand in front of mirrors repeating affirmations. They try to pump themselves up before a sales call. They watch motivational videos at 6 in the morning, trying to manufacture a feeling, this elusive feeling, of confidence. And when the feeling doesn't come, or when it comes and then disappears the moment a prospect says, "I'm not interested," they conclude that something is wrong with them, that they're not cut out for this, that confident people are born, not made. That maybe they should just go back to a comfortable desk job where nobody ever rejects them. I've lived this. I'm not speaking from theory. I've been the person pacing around before a call, trying to find the feeling. I've been the person who lost a deal and then spent 3 days questioning whether I belonged in this profession at all. I've been the person who confused emotional highs with genuine capability. And here's what I eventually learned through years of selling, through building technology, through reading deeply, through failing in ways that were genuinely painful. Confidence is not a feeling you find. It's a posture you take toward outcomes. Let me say that differently, because this is the core of everything I want to share with you today. Real confidence is not "I'm going to win." Real confidence is "I don't care whether I win or lose. I'm going to fully invest myself in this moment regardless." That distinction will change your career. It might change your life. Let me explain why this matters so much, and let me start with what's actually happening in your brain. When you walk into a sales conversation or any high-stakes interaction, your brain is doing something very specific. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and social behavior, is running a prediction model. It's constantly asking, what's going to happen next? Is this going to go well or badly? Am I safe here? Now, when you attach your sense of self-worth to the outcome of the conversation, when confidence means, "I believe I'm going to close this deal," you've essentially told your brain that your survival depends on a specific result. And your brain takes that very seriously. Your amygdala, the ancient threat detection center buried deep in your limbic system, starts firing. Cortisol floods your bloodstream. Your heart rate increases. Your working memory, the cognitive workspace you need for creative thinking, for listening, for adapting in real time, gets hijacked. This is the neuroscience of attachment to outcomes. When you need a specific result to feel okay about yourself, your brain literally enters a mild state of threat response. And here's the cruel irony. The threat response makes you worse at the very thing you're trying to do. You become less perceptive, you miss cues, you talk too much, you push too hard, you stop listening, you start performing instead of connecting. The prospect can feel it. They might not be able to articulate what they're sensing, but their mirror neurons, the neural circuits that allow humans to unconsciously detect the emotional states of others, are picking up on your tension, your neediness, your desperation. And that creates resistance, not because your product is bad, not because your pitch is wrong, but because the emotional signal you're broadcasting is, "I need something from you." And that signal triggers the prospect's own defensive mechanisms. So the very thing you thought was confidence, the belief that you're going to win, is actually creating the conditions for you to lose. Now let me show you what genuine confidence looks like in practice, because it's almost the opposite of what you'd expect. I once worked with a sales professional, let's call her Maria, who was technically brilliant. She knew her product inside and out. She could articulate value propositions in her sleep. She'd studied every sales methodology you can name, but her numbers were mediocre, consistently mediocre, and she couldn't figure out why. When I watched her work, the problem was immediately obvious. Every call, every meeting, every email she was performing, she was trying to be impressive, she was trying to sound confident. And the effort of that performance was creating a strange, subtle wall between her and her prospects. They could feel that she wasn't fully present. She was too busy managing her own internal state to genuinely connect with theirs. Here's what we changed. We didn't work on her pitch. We didn't work on her objection handling. We didn't work on her closing techniques. We worked on one thing, her relationship with outcomes. I asked her a simple question. What would your conversations sound like if you genuinely didn't care whether the person bought or not? She resisted at first. But I do care. That's my job. That's how I feed my family. And I said, yes, you care about your income. You care about your career. But in this specific moment, in this specific conversation, with this specific human being, what if you release the need for them to say yes? What if you just became genuinely curious about their problem and genuinely committed to helping them think it through, even if they never buy anything from you? The shift didn't happen overnight. But over about 6 weeks of practicing this one mental adjustment, her numbers started climbing. Not because she became more skilled. She was already skilled, but because she became more present, more relaxed, more genuinely interested in the human being in front of her, and paradoxically, that made people want to buy from her. This is not just anecdotal. There's a deep principle at work here, and you can find it echoed across multiple domains of human performance. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying what he called flow states, those periods of optimal experience where people perform at their highest level while losing track of time and self-consciousness. One of his most important findings was that flow doesn't happen when you're focused on outcomes. Flow happens when you're fully absorbed in the process, when the task itself becomes the reward. When you stop evaluating how you're doing and simply do, think about what that means for sales. The best conversations you've ever had with a prospect, think back to them right now. I'd bet that in those moments you weren't thinking about commission. You weren't thinking about your quota. You weren't thinking about whether you were going to close. You were just in it. You were genuinely fascinated by their situation. You were thinking creatively about how to help. You were present. That state, that's real confidence. Not the puffed up, chest out, I've got this bravado, but the quiet, centered willingness to be fully in the moment without needing the moment to give you anything in return. And here's the key insight from Csikszentmihalyi's research that most people miss. You can't wait for that state to arrive. You can't find it by searching for a feeling. You create it by choosing to engage fully with whatever task is in front of you. The flow follows the commitment, not the other way around. Let me repeat that because it's genuinely one of the most important things I've ever understood. Action creates the feeling. The feeling does not create the action. If you wait to feel confident before you act, you'll wait forever. But if you act fully, presently, without attachment, the feeling of confidence emerges as a byproduct. Now I want to go deeper here, because this isn't just about individual sales calls. This principle reshapes how you think about your entire career, your entire identity. There's a concept in ancient Talmudic wisdom that essentially says, your obligation is to the labor, not to the reward. You are not required to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. This is thousands of years old, and yet it perfectly describes the psychology of elite performance. The labor is yours, the outcome is not. In practical terms, this means you control the quality of your preparation. You control the depth of your listening. You control the sincerity of your intention to help. You control whether you follow up, whether you show up on time, whether you do the research, whether you tell the truth even when it costs you a deal. All of that is yours, that's your domain, but whether the prospect says yes, that's not yours. That depends on their budget, their timing, their internal politics, their personal psychology, 100 variables you cannot see and cannot control. And when you try to control what's not yours, you lose control of what is. This is not passivity. This is not, I don't care about results. This is a radical reorientation of where you place your energy. You pour everything into what you can control, your craft, your preparation, your presence, your integrity, and you release everything you can't. And counterintuitively, when you do that consistently, your results improve. Not because you're using some cosmic trick, but because you're operating from a state of neurological optimization. Your prefrontal cortex is fully online. Your amygdala is quiet. Your working memory is available. You're creative, perceptive, adaptive. You're the best version of yourself as a professional. Let me give you another angle on this. Naval Ravikant has talked extensively about the idea that you can't be rewarded for something that doesn't feel like work to you if everyone else also finds it easy. The real leverage comes from doing things that are hard for others, but that you can sustain because you've found a way to engage with the process itself. Applied to sales, this is profound. Most salespeople burn out because they're running on outcome energy. Every deal that closes gives them a hit of dopamine. Every deal that falls through gives them a crash of cortisol. They're living on an emotional roller coaster driven entirely by external events. And that's not sustainable. You can ride that roller coaster for a year, maybe 2, maybe 5 if you're tough, but eventually it breaks you. The rejection accumulates, the anxiety compounds, the joy disappears, but the salesperson who learns to derive satisfaction from the process, from the craft of understanding another person, from the art of asking the right question, from the discipline of following through, that person has a renewable energy source. They don't need the dopamine hit from a closed deal to keep going. They're fueled by something more sustainable, the intrinsic satisfaction of doing their work well. And here's the competitive advantage most people miss. That person is also better to work with. Clients feel it. Prospects feel it. When you're not desperate, when you're genuinely there to help, when you're comfortable with silence, when you can hear no without flinching, you become the kind of person people want to do business with. Not because you performed confidence, because you embodied something deeper, something real. Now I want to address something that I know a lot of you are thinking. You're thinking, this sounds nice in theory, but I have a quota. I have bills. I have a manager who doesn't care about my inner state. They care about my numbers. I understand, truly. I'm not living in a philosophical bubble. I run a business. I sell my own technology, my own ideas, my own expertise into international markets to people who have 1,000 other options. I know what it feels like when the rent is due and the pipeline is thin, but here's what I've learned through that pressure. The anxiety about outcomes doesn't improve your outcomes, it degrades them. Worrying about your quota doesn't help you hit your quota. It consumes cognitive resources that you could be using to actually serve your prospects. The Talmudic tradition has a beautiful insight about this. If there is a real opportunity, the resources will follow. The obstacle is rarely what you think it is. The real obstacle is usually the anxiety about the obstacle, which prevents you from acting with clarity and creativity. Think about the best decision you ever made in your career. Was it made from a place of anxiety? Or was it made from a place of clarity, maybe even calm? Most people, when they reflect honestly, realize that their best moves came when they were least attached to a specific outcome and most committed to doing the right thing. So when I tell you to detach from outcomes, I'm not telling you to stop caring about money. I'm telling you to stop letting money control your nervous system during the moments when you need to be at your best. Care about money on Monday morning when you plan your week. Care about money on Friday afternoon when you review your pipeline. But when you're face to face with a human being who has a problem you might be able to solve, let go of everything except that human being and that problem. That's where the magic happens. Let me give you a framework, something practical you can actually use, because I don't believe in inspiration without application. I call this the three-layer detachment practice, and it's built on principles from deliberate practice, research, flow psychology, and what I've learned from years of selling and building AI systems that train salespeople. Layer 1, pre-conversation reframe. Before every significant sales interaction, take 60 seconds, that's all, and ask yourself one question. What would I do in this conversation if I had already hit my quota for the year? Really sit with that. If you had already hit your number, if there were no financial pressure whatsoever, if the only reason you were having this conversation was because you genuinely wanted to help this person think through their challenge. How would you show up differently? Would you listen more? Would you ask different questions? Would you be more honest about whether your solution actually fits? Would you relax? That version of you, quota already hit, nothing to prove, nothing to fear, is the most effective version of you. And the beautiful thing is you can access that version right now, today, regardless of your actual numbers. It's a choice, it's a mental posture, it's a decision about where you place your attention. Layer 2, in conversation anchoring. During the conversation itself, your brain will try to pull you back into outcome thinking. You'll hear the prospect say something positive, and your brain will light up with, "We might close this." You'll hear them raise an objection, and your brain will spike with, "We're losing this." Both of those reactions pull you out of presence and into prediction. When you notice this happening, and with practice, you will notice it, use a physical anchor to bring yourself back. Some people use their breath, one slow, deep breath through the nose, almost imperceptible to the other person. Some people press their thumb and forefinger together. Some people simply shift their weight in their chair. The specific anchor doesn't matter. What matters is that you've trained a neural association between that physical cue and the mental state of present moment engagement. This is not mysticism. This is applied neuroscience. You are using a somatic cue to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and downregulate your amygdala's threat response. Professional athletes do this constantly. Surgeons do this. Military operators do this. It's a learnable skill, and it works. Layer 3, post-conversation processing. After every significant interaction, take 5 minutes, literally set a timer, and review the conversation with one specific lens. Where was I present, and where did I drift into outcome thinking? Don't judge yourself. Don't beat yourself up for the moments you drifted. Just notice them. Catalog them. Over time, you'll start to see patterns. Maybe you drift into outcome thinking when the prospect mentions budget. Maybe you drift when they compare you to a competitor. Maybe you drift when they give you a compliment and you start counting the commission. This post-conversation review is how you build what Anders Ericsson called mental representations, the internal models that experts use to process complex situations. Elite performers in every field don't just practice more. They practice with targeted awareness. They know exactly what they're working on. They have a feedback loop. And this 5-minute review creates that feedback loop for the specific skill of presence and detachment. What I've built into the AI training system I developed is essentially an automated, intelligent version of this process. It helps salespeople review their day, analyze specific conversations, examine their emotional patterns, and gradually build the internal strength and perceptual skill that separates good salespeople from great ones. But you don't need technology to start. You can start today with 60 seconds of reframing, a physical anchor during conversations, and 5 minutes of honest review afterward. Now, I want to take this even further, because this principle of detachment-based confidence doesn't just apply to individual sales calls. It applies to how you position yourself in the world. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what it means to sell yourself, not just a product, not just a service, but yourself, your ideas, your expertise, your perspective on the world. And in this economy, in this era, every one of us needs to do this. Whether you carry the title of salesperson or not, you are selling yourself every day, in job interviews, in networking conversations, on social media. In meetings where you pitch a project to your boss, the ability to sell yourself is the ability to translate your value into terms that other people can understand and appreciate. And here's where most people go wrong. They try to sell themselves by performing confidence. They puff up their resume. They exaggerate their achievements. They adopt a persona that they think the market wants to see, and the result is that they attract the wrong opportunities. They end up in rooms where they don't belong, working with people who don't understand their real value, competing on dimensions where they have no genuine advantage. Real confidence in self-presentation is the same as real confidence in a sales call. It comes from detaching from whether any specific person or market appreciates you, and committing fully to expressing who you actually are and what you actually know. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's legendary partner, spent decades talking about the importance of knowing where your circle of competence lies and staying ruthlessly within it. He didn't try to be impressive across every domain. He went deep in specific areas and then expressed that depth with total clarity and zero apology. And people came to him. He didn't chase the market. He defined his position and let the right people find him. This is a confidence move most people will never make, because it requires tolerating the anxiety of not being everything to everyone. It requires saying, "I'm not for everyone, and that's fine." It requires placing yourself where your specific knowledge, your specific experience, your specific perspective is genuinely valued, and walking away from environments where it's not. For me, that's meant stepping away from trying to appeal to mass markets, and instead focusing on professional-grade, enterprise-level conversations about sales performance, AI application, and personal growth. Not because mass markets are bad, but because that's not where my real value lives. My value lives in depth, in specificity, in the intersection of technology and human psychology. And presenting myself in mass market terms would actually dilute that value. It would be the equivalent of a surgeon trying to compete with WebMD. Wrong playing field. There's another dimension to this that I want to explore, because it's something I see so many ambitious people get wrong. When you build your confidence on outcomes, on closed deals, on revenue numbers, on public recognition, you create a very fragile structure. Every failure threatens the whole building. Every dry spell feels like evidence that you're a fraud. Every comparison to someone who's doing better triggers a spiral of self-doubt. But when you build your confidence on process, on the quality of your daily practice, on the consistency of your effort, on the genuine progress you're making even when the results haven't caught up yet, you create something anti-fragile. Something that actually gets stronger under pressure, because every difficult conversation becomes training, every rejection becomes data, every failure becomes fuel for refinement. The research on deliberate practice is very clear on this. Expertise is not built by succeeding. Expertise is built by engaging with challenges that are slightly beyond your current ability, getting feedback and adjusting. The growth happens in the struggle, not in the victory. If you only feel confident when you're winning, you'll never develop the deep, resilient capability that produces consistent winning over time. I want you to think about this in terms of your daily experience. How often do you end a day feeling like a failure because you didn't close a deal? How often do you dismiss the 20 things you did well because one thing went wrong? How often do you compare your current position to where you think you should be, instead of comparing it to where you were 6 months ago? This is not just a mindset problem. This is a perception problem. Your brain has a well-documented negativity bias. It gives roughly 3 times more weight to negative events than to positive ones. This served our ancestors well when the negative events were lions and poisonous snakes. It does not serve you well when the negative events are a prospect who didn't return your call. So part of building real confidence is actively counteracting this bias, not with empty affirmations, not with delusional positivity, but with honest, disciplined recognition of your progress. What did you learn today? What did you do today that you couldn't do a year ago? What small improvement did you make in your craft? These questions aren't soft, they're strategic. They're rewiring your brain's reward system to reinforce the behaviors that actually drive long-term success. Let me tell you about one more thing that transformed my understanding of confidence, and it comes from a principle I encountered in studying the psychology of attraction and value creation. The principle is this: the person who is trying to get something from the interaction always has less power than the person who is trying to give something. Read that again. The person trying to get has less power than the person trying to give. In a sales context, this is revolutionary. Most sales training teaches you how to get the prospect's attention, how to get them to agree, how to get the close, how to get the referral. And all of that getting energy puts you in a subordinate position. You're essentially asking the prospect for permission to succeed. But when you flip the orientation, when you walk in with the genuine intention of giving value, giving insight, giving clarity, giving a new perspective on their problem, the entire power dynamic shifts. You're not asking for anything, you're offering something, and that transforms how you feel, how you sound, how you carry yourself. This isn't a manipulation technique. This only works if you genuinely have something valuable to offer and you genuinely care about the other person's outcome. If you're faking generosity to manipulate someone into buying, people can smell that from across the room and it will backfire spectacularly. But if you've done the work, if you've gone deep in your domain, if you understand your product's real capabilities and its real limitations, if you've studied your prospect's industry and their specific challenges, then you actually do have something valuable to give. And the confidence that comes from knowing you have something worth giving is fundamentally different from the confidence that comes from trying to convince yourself you're going to win. There's a beautiful idea that I keep coming back to. If you want to live a rich life, help other people live richer lives. This isn't charity, this is strategy. It's the highest form of self-interest, because the people you genuinely help become your long-term relationships, your referral sources, your advocates, your partners. The person who helped them think clearly about a problem 3 years ago, they remember that person. They take that person's call. They introduce that person to their network. This is how real careers are built, not through clever closes. Through genuine contribution. And genuine contribution requires genuine confidence, the kind that comes from knowing your value and being willing to share it regardless of whether this particular interaction produces a transaction. I want to get very practical now about something that trips up a lot of people, especially people who are technically skilled or deeply knowledgeable. There's a trap that smart people fall into, and it's this. They believe that knowledge alone should be enough. They think, I know so much, I'm so good at what I do, surely people will recognize that and come to me. And then they wait, and nothing happens. And they get frustrated and resentful and start blaming the market for being shallow and ignorant. Here's the hard truth. Knowledge that isn't expressed has no creative power. An insight that stays in your head helps no one, including you. A perspective that never reaches the people who need it might as well not exist. This means that selling yourself, putting your ideas out there, writing, speaking, engaging, being visible, isn't vanity. It's a responsibility. If you genuinely have knowledge that can help people, keeping it to yourself is not humility. It's a failure of service. And this is the critical nuance, how you sell yourself matters enormously. If you sell yourself through desperation and neediness, you'll attract low-quality attention. If you sell yourself through hype and exaggeration, you'll attract people who are looking for miracles and will leave the moment they realize you're human. If you sell yourself through genuine depth and honest value, you'll attract the people who actually appreciate what you bring. This is why I believe so strongly in positioning over promotion. Promotion says, "Look at me. Look at how great I am." Positioning says, "Here's what I know, here's how I think, here's the depth of my understanding. If that resonates with you, let's talk." Positioning requires confidence, real confidence. The kind that says, "I'm going to share my actual perspective, not the perspective I think the market wants to hear. And if some people don't get it, that's fine. I'm not for everyone." Let me bring this all together with something that connects to the deepest level of why this matters. The philosopher and investor Naval Ravikant made an observation that I think about almost every day. He said, essentially, that specific knowledge, the kind that comes from your unique combination of experiences, skills, and insights, is the most valuable thing you can develop, and it cannot be trained for. It can only be developed through authentic engagement with your own curiosity and your own path. What does this have to do with confidence? Everything. Because if your most valuable asset is your specific knowledge, your unique way of seeing problems, your particular combination of skills, your distinctive perspective, then confidence isn't about measuring up to someone else's standard. It's about fully owning and expressing what's uniquely yours. You don't need to be the best salesperson in the world. You need to be the most fully expressed version of yourself as a salesperson. You don't need to have the most impressive resume. You need to have the most honestly communicated value proposition. You don't need to win every deal. You need to bring your full self to every conversation and let the right deals find you. This is not passive. Let me be very clear about that. This requires enormous discipline. It requires daily effort. It requires showing up when you don't feel like it, creating when you'd rather consume, engaging when you'd rather hide. But the effort is directed inward, toward your own craft, your own development, your own expression, rather than outward toward manipulating other people's perceptions of you. And when you live this way, something shifts. The anxiety doesn't disappear entirely. Anyone who tells you they never feel anxious is either lying or not taking enough risks. But the anxiety changes character. It stops being the debilitating, identity-threatening kind and becomes the energizing, growth-indicating kind. It becomes the kind of anxiety you feel before doing something meaningful, not the kind you feel before doing something desperate. I want to leave you with a challenge. Not just something to think about, but something to do. For the next 30 days, I want you to run an experiment on yourself. Before every significant sales interaction, every call, every meeting, every important email, I want you to pause and silently say to yourself, "I am here to give, not to get. Whatever happens, I gave my best." After every significant interaction, I want you to spend 5 minutes writing down 2 things. One thing you did well that you want to repeat, and one thing you want to adjust next time. Not what went wrong, what you want to adjust. The language matters. What went wrong activates your threat response. What I want to adjust activates your growth response. Same information, radically different neurological effect. And at the end of each day, I want you to write down 3 things you learned or 3 ways you progressed. Not 3 things you achieved. 3 things you learned. 3 ways you grew. This daily practice of recognizing growth is what rewires the brain's reward circuitry from outcome dependence to process dependence. It's what builds the kind of confidence that doesn't crumble when a deal falls through. 30 days, that's it. And I promise you, not because I'm trying to sell you something, but because the neuroscience and the research and my own experience all converge on this point, you will show up differently. You will sound differently. You will feel differently. And paradoxically, by caring less about outcomes, your outcomes will improve. Here's the final thought I want to leave with you, and it's the one that changed everything for me. Confidence is not something you build and then have forever. It's not a trophy you put on a shelf. Confidence is something you practice every day. In every interaction, it's the daily choice to invest fully in the present moment without requiring the present moment to validate you. Some days you'll do this well, some days you won't. Some days you'll get triggered by a rejection and fall right back into outcome thinking and neediness and self-doubt. That's not failure, that's the practice. You notice, you adjust, you recommit. Just like a meditator who notices their mind wandering and gently brings it back to the breath, you notice your confidence wandering toward outcomes and gently bring it back to presence. Over time, not overnight, not in a week, but over months and years of this practice, something remarkable happens. You develop what I can only describe as quiet power. Not the loud, performative power of the person who's trying to impress everyone in the room. The quiet, centered power of the person who knows what they're worth, who's committed to their craft, who's genuinely interested in helping, and who isn't afraid of hearing no, because their identity doesn't depend on hearing yes. That person is rare. In any industry, in any market, that person stands out, not because they're trying to stand out, but because authenticity is so uncommon that it's automatically remarkable. Be that person. Not because it's a clever sales strategy, although it is. Be that person because it's a better way to live. Because waking up every day free from the tyranny of other people's approval is a kind of freedom that no amount of money can buy. And ironically, it's the kind of freedom that tends to generate a lot of money. The truth about confidence in sales is this: stop trying to find it, stop trying to feel it, stop trying to fake it. Instead, release the need for any particular outcome, commit fully to the human being in front of you, and do your work with everything you have. The confidence will take care of itself. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave me a comment. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.